This is episode number 55 featuring artist Elaine Basa. Welcome to the PleinAir Podcast from PleinAir Magazine. I'm your host, Eric Rhoads, publisher and founder of PleinAir Magazine. In the PleinAir Podcast, we dive into the world of outdoor painting called plein air painting. For those who don't know, it's a French term essentially meaning outdoors or open air. The French say plein, others say plain, but no matter how you say it, plein air or plein air is a huge movement of artists around the world going outdoors to paint. The show is about the movement, and it's brought to you by Fall Color Week, which is my painter's retreat at Acadia National Park in Maine during the peak week of fall color. It's about painting daily with friends in amazing scenery, and we're all together all the time. We have a great time. We sit up late at night and we play music and we sing. Sometimes if it rains or something, we paint portraits. Well, we do that anyway. We even painted lobster one day. We had a lobster dinner, and so we put the lobster out and we painted them. So, lobster portraits. Anyway, you can learn more at fallcolorweek.com. It's my desire to see more people fall in love with plein air painting, and you can help by sharing this podcast with your friends. Also, hope you'll subscribe on iTunes so it comes to you weekly, and please go and leave a comment, give us a rating. We'd like that. And feedback, we need it. Eric at pleinairmagazine.com. Also, it's brought to you by the PleinAir Convention, which is the largest of its kind. PleinAir Convention, the world's largest plein air event, about 1,000 painters. It's going to be in Santa Fe this coming April. Last year, it was massive, but it was so much fun. Everybody had a blast. Had a lot of people who discovered us through the podcast, who showed up, who had never even painted before, never had done plein air, and everybody left a painter or a better painter. We've got over 80 top master artists teaching and working with you. More to be announced. Painting daily, all of us together. It's historic. It's a lot of fun. You can learn more at pleinairconvention.com. Let's get right to our interview with Eleinne Basa. Well, I'm honored to have Elaine Basa on with us today. Elaine, welcome to the PleinAir Podcast.
Hi, Eric. Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you. So where are you? Where's home?
I live in Jackson, New Jersey.
Okay. Where's that?
That's in central New Jersey, like 30 minutes from Trenton.
Okay. And that's the area that George Ennis was from or lived, I believe.
He lived up in Montclair.
Montclair. All right.
Montclair, which is almost an hour and a half from where I live.
Okay. So that's crossing half the state.
Yes. To get to the south, you have to travel around an hour and a half, and to get up north to New York, or to New York is 3/4 of, up is another hour, and to get to the upstate New York, passing New Jersey, would be an hour and a half
right.
to 2 hours.
Well, you and I have painted together, I believe one time. We painted with Don Demers in Maine, out on the edge of the bay in
Bar Harbor.
Bar Harbor. I couldn't think of it.
Yeah, I remember that time.
Yeah.
It was with Kathleen Dunphy too, and Mary Erickson.
Oh, that's right. Wow. Well,
Yeah.
it's fun to be in such good company because you have to really try harder. So for those who don't know, you were the very first winner in 2012 of the PleinAir Salon Competition, and you won a $15,000 cash prize, and you were awarded the prize at the first PleinAir convention, I believe, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So what happened to you since then? You're going to have to give us an update. First off, I'm just kind of curious if there was any benefit to winning an award like that. I remember you telling me you didn't think you were going to win.
Yes, I didn't think I was up there, for that top prize. I remember getting a call and asking who the other painters were in the running And after looking at the list, I was thinking, okay, maybe I'll win something. Um, and but when they called my name, I couldn't believe it. I thought I was going to faint. But it's been great since. It did open a lot of doors for me.
So give me some examples of how that opened doors.
What 2012 I think was just a lucky year for me. That's one of the things that happened to me that year. I was gaining a little headway with my career. I was getting into the shows I wanted to, joining the California Art Club. I did good in that show too that year. But winning that thing, I think, put my name in the radar of some galleries and some shows. So like I got calls from several galleries, and I got invited to some shows. Like there was some invitational shows that I got invited to, and that was that year, 2012, or for the next year, 2013, and that having your painting on the cover too.
Yeah, that's right. You were on the cover of PleinAir magazine, so that
Mhm.
and that was a beautiful painting.
Oh, thank you, thank you.
I actually have a painting that you gave me sitting right here in my office. It's always beautiful to look at every day.
Oh, thank you, thank you. Was that at the paint out that you do?
Yeah, the Publisher's Invitational in the Adirondacks.
Yeah, that was a good experience too. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, we enjoyed having you there. So, what I think would be fun for people is to kind of return to the past and help us understand how you got started. Because I think that if I remember correctly, you started out when you were really, really, really young.
Yes, I was born and raised in the Philippines, and I was lucky enough to have a teacher when I was 8 years old. My parents put me under this teacher who taught other children, not just me. And we were taught the classical way. Back then, I didn't know that it was a classical, rigorous type of training, but he would um, set up a still life and put a light on it and asked us to draw it using pencil or charcoal. And I was 8 years old, so I wanted to do color, but he and all the other kids wanted to, draw or color or use colored pencils or pastels. But the teacher insisted we do it in black and white using our pencils or charcoal. And even before that, he taught us how to do the value scales and made us do that properly, filled one sketchbook with it before he even did that still life in charcoal thing.
So, how did he do that? What was that process? Did he give you photographs to copy, or were you doing it from life or drawings of other people? What was that like?
Well, he would set up a still life and put a light on a spotlight on it.
What I meant is, you said that before you even got to the still life, he made you do value studies. What were the value studies like?
Well, value studies were just the value charts, just dark to light.
Oh, just
shaded.
actually sketching them out. I see. Okay.
Yeah, just actually doing the bars, value 1 to 10, and getting familiar with strokes, the proper strokes or the proper pressure to apply.
Hand-eye coordination.
It was just lines, how to shade a certain, the square from dark to light. So it's just the value charts, no drawing yet.
So now that you teach, I assume you teach, yes?
I haven't taught in 2 years now, actually.
All right. So when you were teaching, is this something that you went back to? Do you start with values?
Yes, I do. I start with a still life, actually, even if it's different when we have a workshop because you're limited by the number of days. But I taught privately in my studio. I taught a mentorship thing with 1 or 2 students, and I they were landscape painters, but I told them we have to start with still lifes and values and drawing first. So
Well,
that's,
essentially, a landscape is a very, very busy still life, right? Lots and lots and lots of forms and shapes.
yes. And you can't, it, painting plein air right away is very difficult for the beginner, especially if you don't know how to draw properly or copy what you see. You have to copy what you see first. And I think the still life would be a perfect starting point. I remember reading um, Emil Carlson did the same thing at the maybe at Art Students League in New York, where he taught started the students with still lifes before he brought them out into the landscape.
Right. Well, so many people have started people with blocks or cones or balls so that they can essentially get the shape and form. So the still life makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it does. It just starts you off with learning your line, your values, drawing, and it helps you be familiar with your tools, your paints, brushwork, and getting confidence with putting the paint down on canvas at least before you go outside.
Absolutely. Well, I remember the first time I went out plein air painting, I had already been painting. I was very comfortable with the materials, but when I went outside, everything was completely different. it was
Yeah.
it was a disaster. I took a canvas out there, a stretched canvas, and it was like putting a sail on my easel. It just quickly flew away.
Yeah, it's harder outside because you're dealing not with just drawing, you're dealing with a changing light, then you're dealing with trying to see things, simplifying things. You're dealing with different color and shadows. There's so many things that you have to, bugs and all these experiences to fall into the mix. So,
So that raises the question, it's a lot easier to stay in the studio and paint. Um, why is it that you have become a plein air painter, and why is it that you go through those struggles and put up with those inconveniences to paint outside?
well, because you just learn a lot and see more outside. You can't be a landscape painter and not learn from nature. You have to study your subject. You have to know it intimately to be better at it. In fact, I remember one of the best years. Sometimes I have years where I paint better than other years, but one of my best or more productive years was when I would wake up to see my kids go to school, and the bus comes at like 6:45 for my kids, and I would wake up and send them off to school. And as I watched them, from my window, I would at the same time watch the sunrise. And this was every morning. And the sunrise was different every morning. And it just gave me so many paintings in my head, like so many ideas. And it taught me how light comes through the trees. Basically, the more I observed nature, the better equipped I was in painting it. So that year, because of that observation every morning of the sunrise, I felt helped me with my paintings.
So
And
you're raising kids. What ages are they now?
well, they're grown now. My youngest is 16. He's uh, in high school, and my daughter's 22.
So you have one at home, two at home,
I have two at home.
two
My
at
my
home.
daughter's actually staying at home and painting too. We transformed our dining room into her studio.
Oh, how wonderful! So what has it been like for you trying to be a professional painter while simultaneously raising a family?
It was difficult at first. because I had to be a mother first to my kids. And when we moved here, I had just gotten married, and my kids were born here, and I couldn't paint in the beginning. I had to raise my kids, and it was only when they started going to school that I had time to paint. And in fact, I remember um, when I became a full-time painter was when I had my studio in our house now in Jackson, and that gave me the option to just leave my stuff and paint every day versus painting in the dining room and cleaning up every day.
Yeah,
So
that's tough.
yeah, and I think it was when my kids started going to school when they were 7, 8 years old. That's when and then I got my studio at home. That's when I was able to do this full time, which was around 2004, I think,
Hmm.
is when I started being a full time painter. Before that, I was just painting on the weekends if I could, or when my husband would watch the kids. And there was no progress. It was just like a hobby. I loved it. I've always loved painting, but unless you do it full time, I don't think you'll see, your progress.
Typically, as I watch friends and acquaintances over the years, typically when they make the decision based on whatever their circumstances might be to go at it full time and to paint full time every day, you see a huge transition in their work over the course of the next 2 years. It's like, once you're at it every day and you're putting in your 6 or 8 or 10 or 12 hours a day, it
Mhm.
it changes everything. Did you find that the case for you as well?
Yes, very true. I think what's more important too, in your progress is the everyday thing. It's not the number of hours. I remember there was a time I was just painting 3 hours a day, but it was every day. And I I think that contributes more to your learning than the hours. It would be better to paint every day for 3 hours, in my opinion, than paint every weekend for 11, 12 hours.
Yeah.
Because what you learn today, you can use for the next day and the next. What you learn with your brushwork or whatever progress you do today, you move to the next day.
There's also a rhythm that occurs that gets lost. I remember when we were shooting our first art instruction video with Max Ginsberg. Max told me that he had rehearsed by painting 7 days in a row, all day, every day for 7 days. And I said, Max, you've been painting for 80 years. How come you need to do that? And he said, because if I don't do it, I lose my rhythm. And he said, if I'm 3 or 4 days away from painting and then I have to paint, I'm not as good as I was if I did it every day.
That's true. I agree. I do agree. It's like playing the piano. You have to do your um, keys every time, and if you stop doing that, you get rusty.
Do you
It's the same
play?
with drawing. No, I don't. I don't.
So, what advice do you have for somebody who might be a parent, a mom or a dad who is trying to raise their kids and they really want to pursue this painting thing more full time? What encouragement or advice can you give them?
Oh, just do it. Just find a time to do it, and I sort of made my painting time very precious and a priority. So be a mom first, and when they're in school, instead of trying to fix the house or do the laundry or get house chores done, just paint, because these things these things will always be there. But the painting time is different, because painters need a block of time. You can't paint 1 hour, then do the laundry or do dishes and then paint another hour. I mean, that just won't work. So make sure you have a block of time, and you have to prioritize that block of time over stuff that always happens every day at home. So
So,
that be my advice.
Okay.
Just,
Just do it.
Make the time precious. And I remember when my kids were growing up, I always told them, when mom's in the studio, this is my time. So, if you need me, I'll be done at this certain time. And
Right.
while
Don't come in unless something's bleeding or broken.
Yeah, yeah. And somehow they learned that when they had a problem between the two of them, they would try to fix it among themselves. In the afternoon is when they give me all these, oh, he did that, she did this, all these petty quarrels that they had or problems that they encountered during the day, and it just worked out for me.
We have tens of thousands of people who are listening to this podcast at this very moment. And we have discovered that though there are lots and lots of people who are experienced plein air painters, professionals, semi-professionals, hobbyists, etc., there are also lots and lots of people who have never tried plein air painting. And in fact, there are people we've discovered have never even tried painting, but are taking it up because they've heard something about it on the podcast. So what I'd like you to do is to walk through, based on what you know today, based on the experience you've had as a painter, the experiences you had when you were learning, tell somebody, first and foremost, what's the process you want them to do when they first decide they want to learn to paint. And don't go into tremendous amounts of depth because there are a lot of people who already know how to paint. And then take it to the next level and say, okay, now you want to take it outside. Here's what I recommend.
Well, first, for this is people who already has some painting experience. I remember what helped me when I was starting. So I can only, talk about what I did. I would research a lot of artists that I like, the historic artists, and compile an image database on my computer of the artists that I like. And I would look at that and do that for 2 to 3 hours in the morning. And I did that before I even painted, whether it's setting up a still life in my studio or before I went out. I would look at a lot of art, and I think that, you think it's not helping, but eventually after 2-3 years, it will help you elevate your taste level, especially if you're looking at, the old masters or the dead guys. And eventually it will trickle down to your work. So that's the one thing that is a big deal, I think, for me. And just never stop learning. I remember one of the first workshops I took was with Skip Whitcomb, and he said, you're only as good as what you know. So your knowledge, there's a gap between your knowledge and what you can paint. And in between that is frustration. So accumulate as much knowledge as you can by learning from these painters that you like. Then when you go out into the field and when you start painting, you will have some of these ideas in your head or knowledge from these guys to start with, at least.
Yeah. Did you ever do any copying of any of the painters that you liked or photographs of their paintings?
Yes, I did. In fact, one of the ways I learned color was to study George Inness's work and his palette. And because when I go out painting, I bring my paintings in, I felt like because I know the images that I see every day, I'm always dissatisfied with the color that I get. Either it's washed out or it's all green. So what I did is I used some of the colors of the tone list, George Innes, John Francis Murphy, and put those colors in my work, using my subject matter or the subject matter of what I painted that day. So I'd bring my paintings in, and I would and use, the composition and the subject matter that I did, but use, for example, George Inness's color scheme. And by doing that, it taught me how to mix these colors. And that was my first experimentation with color and learning how to mix certain colors. And I researched George Inness's palette. At that time they used lead white. He used a form of Prussian blue, and I tried mixing those together, and I got colors that I liked better than the colors that I was using.
Oh, that's a great tool. Absolutely great tool. Learning from the masters. So
Yeah.
take it forward to plein air painting. So you're telling somebody about their getting ready to go out and do their first plein air painting. What do you recommend for them?
Well, keep it simple. I think don't try to do the Tetons. You're starting to paint. Just keep it simple. Pick a simple composition, a simple, maybe just a tree with a shadow cutting across the foreground, and just try to do that. Simplify your shapes. You're only you're only going to do try to do it fast. So the light changes in 20-30 minutes. So try to just gather as much information as you can using the paints that you have or whatever tools you brought out. Because for me, plein air painting is a gathering process. It's not for me, it's not an end in itself. It's information gathering for some studio work or a painting that you want to do in the studio. So I would take as much notes as I can. The quality of light, is it a gray day or a sunny day? What the temperature, is it cold, it's warm? Put as much information as you can before you even start to paint.
Don't you think temperature is one of those things that it takes painters a while to discover, because it's kind of though it's simple, it's also fairly sophisticated, and a lot of early stage painters just don't learn to think about temperature. How can you explain that for people? And I know it's hard to do it without a visual, but is there a way that you can help people understand that piece?
Well, temperature is just warm and cool, but it's not, for me, it's relative. So warm colors are, closer to red, and cool colors are blues, closer to blues and grays. But a blue can be warm or cool depending on the color next to it. So is a red. So there can be a cool blue and a warm blue, and there can be a cool red and a warm red. So for me, it's relative. But to make it simple, the warm colors are towards the reds and yellows, and cool colors are towards the blues and greens. And there is warm and cool in all shapes in the landscapes. Like a sky can be gray, but there's areas which are closer to the sun that can be a warmer gray, and farther away from the sun could be a cooler gray. So for me, when you go outside, I think observation is key. And I always tell my students, if you can't see it, you can't paint it. So try to be very sensitive to subtleties in shifts in color, shifts in value, and shifts in temperature. So like, for example, the sky. When you look at the sky, there is a gradation between left and right and up and down. It's not one flat tone. There's no flat tone in the sky unless you're isolating a small area. So I would tell the beginner, gather as much information as you can by taking notes and looking, and then start painting.
And when you say taking notes, you're talking about taking color notes. You're actually talking about notes on your canvas, not physical notes.
Both.
Both. Okay.
Both.
And do you have warms and cools in your palette in terms of, a lot of painters will have a warm and a cool of each color, a warm and a cool red, a warm and a cool yellow, etc.
Yes, I do. I work with the warms and cools of each primaries. So I have a warm and cool yellow, warm and cool red, a warm and cool blue. And then I add certain convenience colors like yellow ochres and transparent oxide brown, some viridian, and a light king's blue, which is just to gray down, to cool down some of my mixtures.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's what I do.
So one of the things I'm curious about for you is, do you get continually seduced by change? One of the things that was happening to me for years, I've stopped it pretty much now, but I would go to a workshop. So you mentioned you went to Skip's workshop, and I would put out all the colors and try to use the colors that Skip used. And then I would do that for a while. And then I'd end up going to another workshop, and then everything changed. And of course, in my business where I get to attend these video shoots of all these wonderful artists, every week I was getting a different color on my palette. And I finally just got to the point where I said, I have to stabilize, because if I keep changing it all the time, I'm never going to remember the color mixtures and how they all interact with one another. So finally, after spending time with Joe McGurl, I just said, I am cementing this. I'm not adding any more colors. Of course, I already have, but not too much. What about you?
Yeah, I changed because I always try to learn. So I always try to experiment with different colors. And I try all the colors that I see. If there's a new color out that someone recommended online, and I give it a shot. But it's funny you mentioned that, because when I also took a workshop with Scott Christensen, and he used a limited palette with his bunch of grays. So, and like you, when I got back from the workshop, I would use his colors, and I try to do it for 6 or 7 months before I change things up, because then you don't learn, you don't get the benefit of the workshop if you don't try what the teacher's teaching you. So I tried his method, and then eventually I tweaked it towards my, the colors that I liked, or the effects that I liked. Mm-hmm. But I remember one of the reasons I stopped teaching was the first year I did a workshop in North Carolina. I was teaching basically the Scott Christensen way, where I would pre-mix all the colors before I started painting using his palette. And then the next year I did the same workshop, and some of the students came back. But this year I didn't pre-mix everything. I pre-mixed just the sky. And I told them, well, and one of the students asked, last year you told us to do this. This year, why are you not pre-mixing all the colors? And I said, well, I didn't get enough variety in my work, because I was just pulling from the mixtures I had already done. And then I went back the third year, and this time I didn't pre-mix at all. So the students, there's 2 or 3 students that came back every year, and they said, so you're changing it up again, your process. And after that, I said, okay, I can't teach, because I don't want the responsibility of these students learning different things every time.
Well, I think there's some value in that, though. Everybody is at a different place at a different time, and as someone who's teaching, part of the role is to simplify as much as possible so they can get some effective painting done, and so they don't get discouraged. And so I remember, for instance, I was taught originally on the Frank Riley palette, which was, a series of rows of colors, flesh tones and grays and greens and so on. And my instructor said to me, you have to follow this to the T. If it's not on here, you don't put it down. And then one day we were having a discussion. He says, well, I didn't really mean that. He said, the reality is that once you get to the point where you're comfortable with it, you can mix your paint as you go. You don't have to have these piles. But as a discipline for an early stage painter, it was a really beautiful thing.
Yes, you have to have a system, I think, in the beginning, or else you'll be all over the place. I mean, you have to learn a system first. Like, for example, Richard Schmid's color palette. It's good for the beginner to have such a system to follow, which helps them, especially if I've had students that don't even know how to mix green. So how do you start painting without basic knowledge of at least color mixing?
Yeah.
So give them a system and tell them to master it or learn it at least for 6 months. And then when they're comfortable with it, they can tweak it to their own sensibilities or to their own taste. But it's a good starting point to learn from somebody and do that for a number of months before you move on.
Yeah, well, that's hard to hear when you're beginning because you want to have instant success. Kevin Corder was the first plein air painter I ever met in my life. I saw him at an event that I attended that was filled with plein air painters. One of the first plein air events I'd been to. It was called The Scene on the Straight. And he said, look, paint small, go out and get some little tiny panels, 5x7 panels, and paint 100 of them and limit yourself to 30 minutes or an hour max on each painting. And just so that you're getting out there, you're doing something. Don't try to pick a scene that's overly complicated, which you said, and then just keep doing it over and over again. He said, when you get 100 paintings done, you will have transitioned considerably. How do you feel about that?
That's good advice. I totally agree with what he said, and I think it's a good starting point or goal for a beginner to do a certain number of paintings. And there's a value in him saying to just do 6x8s and paint it fast. Because I remember sometimes you're driving home and that's when you see the best scenes. So what my process was to go home and I would get a small 5x7 or 4x6 and do what I saw in paint from memory. And that way too, you eliminate all the unessentials and you just paint the essential.
Yeah. And
the same way outside, when you're painting these small studies, if you paint fast, you're eliminating the unessential details and you're just going for the masses and the overall lighting effect. So
and you're painting instinct instead of overthinking it. And
yes.
I think one of the enemies of all of us is to, overthink it, try to put too much detail in. There may be a time for that at some point, but you've just got to you got to get that instinct going.
Yes, and it's good for lighting too, and especially his type of work where he focuses on fast changing light, the low light effects. You can't paint like that for 2-3 hours. If you do, you're essentially painting from memory. That's what you're doing. But when you're painting those low light effects, the sunrises and the sunsets, you have to be done in 20-30 minutes because actually the light changes every 10 minutes at that point.
So let's move forward to a different direction now. I'm curious why you paint.
Why? It's what I do. It's who I am. I can't think of doing anything else. It's like my language. Some people, they write, they play music to express who they are or what their experiences are with the world and try to convey that to the audience. For me, it's painting. Sometimes people tell me, can you do this? Write something about yourself. I said, I can't write. I'm not a writer. That's why I paint, because I'm not good at certain things. And I think painting is a way for me to express my experiences and my feelings and about certain things, or the landscape. When I see a landscape, there's so much beauty that I want to convey. There's so much feeling that I feel when I see it that I have to express it somehow. And if I was a writer, I'd write about the experience, but I'm not. So I paint it. I think that's why I paint. And I've always remembered, ever since I was young, I've always wanted to be a painter. When we were young, we'd write, our goals. And I was in college, and I found this diary that I had when I was 8. And inside I saw, when I was 8, I put there, one of my goals was to be a painter.
Well, there's a good lesson for setting goals, right? It happens.
Yeah.
You commit it to writing, you can commit it to your memory.
Yeah. That's so true.
So if you could, if you decided to become an evil person and a thief, and you could slip into any museum in the world and slip one painting out and have that painting over your fireplace so that you could look at it every day for the rest of your life, what would that painting be?
Oh my God. Does it have to be one?
Yep, one.
Oh, I'm torn between two
Okay,
paintings.
well, okay. Let's hear what the two are, and then we'll work that out.
Well, one painting is a painting I saw at the National Academy of Design when there was a Zorn show in town in New York. And I walked in there to see the Zorn show, but then I went downstairs to the museum and saw the collection of the National Academy of Art, and there was this Alexander Harrison painting called Moonrise. And I probably spent more time staring at that painting than the whole entire Zorn show.
And what was it about it?
It was a moon rising close to the horizon, but it was a marine painting of waves. It's just it's so simple, and that's a good example of simple poetry.
And what's the other painting?
The other painting I saw at the Met, I don't know the title, but it was by Emil Carlsen, and it's another marine painting of just low horizon waves or water with big skies. And when I saw that, it was under glass. You know how they have the reserve collection in the basement, but I looked at the brushwork and tried to look at how he did it, and it seemed like he just scumbled with a big brush, white on top of the whole canvas, and that's how it looked. But you step back, and it's this wonderful painting. It's a square format, and the Alexander Harrison was a horizontal format. So it's funny how, now I think about it, they're both marine paintings.
Well, there you go. And how much marine painting are you doing?
Not much.
Well, I think you better get busy if those are the ones. And I would say probably the security is a little tighter at the Met, so I think we figured out which one you're going to get in your living room. So yeah. Okay. Well, if that disappears anytime soon, I think you and I are both in trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're saying this in front of 50,000 people. So, well, this has been a wonderful adventure. Any final words of encouragement or thoughts about painting that you want to share with everybody?
Just keep at it. If you're a beginner or you're just starting out, just know that everybody is in this journey, whether you're professional or a beginner. We're just at different stages of a journey. There's no end in sight. It's the process. It's just enjoy the process and just keep learning.
And I would add to that, I know you didn't ask, but I think one thing that happens is that we all, when we're early stage, we're a little bit embarrassed to show other people our work, or we're maybe not very encouraged by what we're doing, and just understand that everybody's been there, that everybody, including the top tier painters, everybody has done really rotten paintings.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Except you, of course.
No, I show, you just see what I show. There's just tons in my studio that doesn't even get out there. But that's a fact.
Yeah.
You know, you just show what you want the public to see.
Well, you have to edit.
Yeah, you have to edit, and you have to be very picky. I remember, when you mentioned that the painting that I submitted to the PleinAir Salon, I think that whole year I only submitted 2 paintings to that competition, and for me, that was the only 2 paintings that I felt was good out of my whole year. So that's the only 2 that I submitted. So be very selective, I guess, and be careful what you put out there.
Well, and even be careful what you put on your website or your Facebook, because we all have a tendency to fall in love with our work. And sometimes you need perspective. I was on a television show the other day and I had to paint for it. And I painted the painting. I was really thrilled with it. I felt like I did a really good job. And then 2 days later, I walked back into my studio and I said, oops. So you just, perspective is the great thing. So don't be in a hurry to put it out there.
Yeah. And they also say that you always like the last painting you did.
Yeah.
until the next painting comes along.
I think a really great thing to do is to paint them and then turn them over and get them out of your site and stay away from them if you can for 2 or 3 months or longer. It's a little trick I learned from Fred Picker, who was a photographer, who said that he could not, when he was enthusiastic about having just taken them, he couldn't get a real perspective on them. But after he put them away for a while and then he looked at them, he was looking at them with fresh eyes and he could see the errors of his ways, errors of his composition.
Yes, that's true. I do that too. I have a lot of paintings that are just here in my studio, and there's something that I need to do with them, or there's something that I can't fix. And if I know what to do with them, I work on them. But if I don't know what to do with them, I just leave them in my studio, turn them around, or cover them with other paintings. And that is so true. And it's also good to have friends who you can ask, who you trust, to ask their opinion on some paintings that you're having a problem with, or you can't quite figure out what is wrong with it.
That's a great suggestion. Send a photo to somebody you trust and say, help, I need help. Yeah. Yes,
because you need fresh eyes looking at your painting, whether it's your eyes or another person's eyes. It's always a good way to get another perspective on what you're doing. And also a good tip is also turn your painting upside down or look at it through a mirror.
Absolutely. Well, Elaine, thank you so much for your time today. You've given us a lot of insights and a lot of inspiration, and
thank you.
I'm honored that you would be on my podcast.
Well, thanks, Eric. The honor is mine, and thank you for everything you do and for us as painters. Appreciate it.
Hey, somebody's got to do it. You're welcome. Thanks again to Eleinne Basa. What an incredible painter. Today's interview is brought to you by fallcolorweek.com. If you want to go in Acadia National Park in October, coming up very soon, if there's seats left, any day there won't be. So get on it. It's a lot of fun, a lot of color, a lot of beautiful scenery to paint, and a whole week for yourself of painting with just us, a small group, about less than 100 people. So come on up, fallcolorweek.com. Also, the podcast is sponsored by the PleinAir Convention. It's a phenomenon. We are so thankful and proud of it. Thank you so much. It's going to be in Santa Fe. Santa Fe is so beautiful. Got to go to Santa Fe. To learn more, go to pleinairconvention.com. Well, the plein air movement is red hot, which may be why Plein Air continues to be the top-selling representational art magazine nationwide at Barnes & Noble. We are also thankful for that. Thank you so much. Drop by, pick one up, or get a subscription for yourself. Half the price in the newsstand at pleinairmagazine.com. plein.com. Well, this has been fun. Let's do it again sometime, like next week. We will see you then. My name is Eric Rhoads. I'm the publisher and the founder of PleinAir Magazine. Remember, it's a great big world out there. Go paint it. We'll see you. Bye-bye.